morning. Oscar buzz. It was quite the night last night in Hollywood. We are going to give you one of the top moments of the night. Also, President Trump and Kim Jong Un are getting ready for their second high-stakes summit. We'll get all the details on that. And finally, the Chicago PD are out talking about the Jussie Smollett case. We'll give you the latest on that case right after these headlines.
Vice President Mike Pence has landed in Colombia. He's there to meet with Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido.
And to you, President Guaido, a very simple message from President Trump, that we are with you 100%.
It follows a weekend of deadly violence after Venezuela's military blocked humanitarian aid from entering the country. Pence is expected to announce new actions to address the crisis, which could include sanctions to increase financial pressure on President Nicolas Maduro. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Maduro's days are numbered. The food company Kraft Heinz is reportedly exploring the sale of Maxwell House coffee. Analysts say Kraft Heinz has struggled as consumers turn away from older brands in favor of healthier products and private label brands. Well, Hello Kitty, a mountain lion walking right up to a house in Sacramento. The 100-pound cat was roaming the neighborhood a long way from the mountains. Animal control tranquilized the mountain lion and will release him back into the wild.
Welcome to the Debrief, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo, and Oscars, I should say Hollywood's biggest night, did not disappoint. The Oscars had many memorable moments last night, but this one may have topped them all. Check it out.
In the shallow, in the shallow, in the shallow, we're far from the shallow now.
Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper brought the house down with their Oscar-winning hit, The Shallow, and Danya Bacchus now has more on that. Danya?
Diane, we are no longer allowed behind this fence. That's because crews are working to break down the red carpet that was in front of the Dolby Theater for last night's Oscars. The show was hostless for the first time in 3 decades, and everything seemed to be seamless, but that doesn't mean that there was no controversies or upsets. One of those major upsets coming in the Best Picture category, Green Book, winning that one. Reportedly, director Spike Lee was so upset that he stormed out of the Dolby Theater because of that win. Another upset came in the Best Actress category, Olivia Colman beating out Glenn Close. Even I thought Glenn Close was a shoo-in for that one. Then let's talk about some of the other major categories. Rami Malek winning for Best Actor, Mahershala Ali for Best Supporting Actor, and then Regina King for Best Supporting Actress. Let's talk about those major performances last night. Adam Lambert and Queen opening up the show, but it was Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper that everyone cannot stop talking about. That was a highly anticipated performance, and they did not disappoint, with many people talking about that chemistry that they say was so undeniable. Diane?
All right, Danya Bacchus for us. And now over to Chicago, where, or rather over to Washington, where President Trump is about to come face-to-face with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. This is another high-stakes summit between the two, and Lana Zach is at the White House with more on this. Lana, what are we, the U.S., hoping to get out of this meeting?
Well, President Trump has been rather vague about his expectations for what he thinks North Korean leader Kim Jong Un will deliver during this second summit. And I have to tell you and all of our viewers that the expectations are really a lot higher than they were on the first summit. Remember, the fact that it happened at all was historic the first time around. But since then, very little has been done, no concrete steps taken by North Korea. And in fact, what we heard from the Trump administration is really a celebration that they haven't continued doing nuclear testing rather than praising them for any dismantling of their weapons. The Wall Street Journal was also quoted as saying that there were 3 major objectives from the Trump administration. They say they want a freeze on weapons of mass destruction, a definition of denuclearization, and a roadmap for future negotiations. But all of these are really very minor when it comes to goals. And you know that North Korea is notorious about making promises and then ultimately not following through with them. And just just a little bit ago, we heard President Trump speaking. He said that he is speaking to North Korea. We're speaking loud, and I think we can have a very good summit, is what the president said. But that's even scaling back a bit from some of the rhetoric that he had used before, Diane, about how interested he was in being able to come back with a real victory towards denuclearization. And I asked President Trump on Friday about what he was willing to give up in terms of concessions from the United States. He told me that U.S. troop levels in South Korea were absolutely not part of the negotiations, but he said everything else is on the table. Diane?
All right, Lana Zach from the White House. Lana, thank you. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Jussie Smollett is maintaining his innocence against accusations that he staged a hate crime against him. This as the Chicago police superintendent spoke to our very own Robin Roberts this morning. Eva Pilgrim is in Chicago with the latest on all of this. And Eva, we heard the Chicago police talk about a check involved in this case, and it seems like we're now learning a little bit more about that check. What's the latest?
That's right, Diane. We actually overnight obtained a copy of that check that Jussie Smollett wrote to one of the two men who was considered an alleged attacker. And on that check, you see it for $3,500. You also see in the note line there on the bottom left-hand corner a little bit of information. It says for training and nutrition. I believe it's a 5-week plan. That was something that Robin actually asked Chicago's top cop about this morning. Take a listen to what he had to say about it all.
Right now, as I said, he still has the presumption of innocence, and he'll get his opportunity in court if he chooses to go that route. And again, you know, I was very acutely aware of the situation in terms of the Chicago Police Department declaring he was a suspect. But I can tell you this, Robin, there's a lot more evidence that hasn't been presented yet that does not support the version that he gave.
There's more because you presented quite a bit. I mean, legal experts said that's the most that they've seen being presented up front like that.
But there's still a lot of physical evidence, video evidence, and testimony that just simply doesn't support his version of what happened.
And you heard Robin mention there was a lot of evidence presented. That evidence was presented at a bond hearing. Jussie Smollett is out on bond. Currently, he's due back in court in March, Diane.
All right. And so, Eva, what happens with this case from here? You know, you heard the police superintendent talking to Robin. Was there something about that interview that really stuck out to you?
Well, I think what's interesting is the police superintendent mentioned that it's still an active investigation. So they're still gathering evidence and talking to people. And he mentioned to Robin that they have a lot of other witnesses and evidence that they haven't presented publicly yet. And that's always the big question mark. What else do they know that the rest of us don't know? And we'll have to wait and see when it actually all plays out in court. Jussie Smollett, though, maintaining that he is innocent of all of these charges.
All right, Eva Pilgrim from Chicago. Eva, thank you. Meanwhile, R&B singer R. Kelly was back in court this morning after failing to post bail over the weekend. He is charged with 10 counts of aggravated sexual assault. Lindsay Davis was actually in the courtroom this morning, and she joins us now from Chicago with the latest on that. Lindsay, what was the scene like in court this morning?
Hey, good morning to you, Diane. Quite a difference this morning from what we saw over the weekend. So we'll start with what just happened here today. So primarily the point of today's hearing, which was sparsely attended. You just heard somebody shouting over here. He didn't do it. But sparsely attended. Basically, this was to assign a judge. So that happened in one courtroom. And so that happened. So he's assigned Judge Flood. Then we went to a different courtroom. And then at that point, his lawyer, Stephen Greenberg, R. Kelly's lawyer, entered a plea of not guilty on all of the charges against him, and then that was it. R. Kelly appeared in court with an orange jumpsuit today, had his hands behind his back, responded when the judge only asked him, you know, what's his name? He said Robert Kelly, and at that point he said, was he understanding the conditions if he's able to come up with that $100,000 to get out of jail, essentially that he does not have any contact with any of the witnesses or the alleged victims in this case, and also that he's not to have any contact with anyone under the age of 18 years old. His lawyer also said that he turned in R. Kelly's passport, and then that was it. And so now we're waiting to see if he's going to be able to make that $100,000 in order to get out of jail. On Saturday, though, for the bond hearing, it was quite a different case. I mean, it was packed in the courtroom, standing room only, in fact, and that's where the prosecutor's office went through detail by detail the alleged accounts of the 4 alleged victims. One was his hairdresser. One, they said, met R. Kelly on her 16th birthday. One they also claimed was one of the fans who was standing on the steps outside of this courthouse during his trial in 2008. And then the 4th victim, interestingly, was at the heart of that 2008 case. Allegedly, was at the heart of that 2008 case, and is allegedly who appears on this new sex tape, or recently reviewed sex tape that has been presented by Michael Avenatti, although it's said to be nearly 2 decades old, Diane.
And Lindsay, you know, one of the things that has attracted a lot of attention is the fact that he's now gone the whole weekend and has not been able to present this $100,000 that he needs in order to post bail. Is there any more information on his finances? This is a 3-time Grammy winner. You would think he would be able to come up with that kind of money.
I mean, that's what has been very interesting to many of the people here. As you said, I mean, this is somebody that Billboard described just a few years ago as the most prolific R&B artist in the past 25 years. He sold more than 60 million albums, and so you would think that he has access to a lot of money, but there has been a lot also said in recent years. In fact, that we've heard that he's in excess of $160,000 in arrears with back child support, and that's another issue here that comes into play. Because we're told, according to court documents, that if he doesn't make that payment of $161,000 by March 6th, he'll go back to jail. That's if he has managed to come up with $100,000 to bond out at this point. But he's had 2 homes in Atlanta that he was renting, that he was evicted because of back rent. He lost his home here in Chicago area a few years ago in foreclosure. He's been dogged by financial trouble for years. And at this point, you know, what his lawyer told the judge on Saturday was his finances are, quote, a mess. And basically he said, look, he's not able to, because of these allegations, because of that explosive docuseries on Lifetime, Surviving R. Kelly, he's not able to currently have any income. Basically, he's not getting money from royalties, and he's not able to tour.
Quite a fall, Lindsay. We're also noticing there are a lot of cameras behind you, a lot of action going on. What is everybody waiting for?
So at this point, I think that the cameras are just kind of staged to see who they might see come out of court, and perhaps if there's going to be a press conference from the attorney Michael Avenatti or from R. Kelly's attorney Steve Greenberg. Michael Avenatti at least tweeted this morning that he had handed a second tape over to the state attorney's office, and so there are a lot of questions about that. Again, an alleged sex tape, reportedly, according to Avenatti, that includes R. Kelly and an underage minor.
And Lindsay, I know we're also hearing that he's being investigated on a federal level as well. What do we know at this point about that?
Well, what we know is that the multiple agencies are investigating Robert Kelly, including, but not limited to, the FBI, the IRS, Homeland Security investigations, and these are allegations including child exploitation and possible sexual trafficking, and that has to do with several people who allegedly were minors that he moved across state lines to various homes, and so that's why the Homeland Security investigations is a part of it. But there are some questions about, you know, money and payments and hush money and all of that. And so even if he's able to surmount the legal challenges that he faces here in Chicago, it seems that other cases are potentially looming against him.
All right, Lindsay Davis from Chicago. Lindsay, we appreciate it. Thanks. Meanwhile, the NTSB is now frantically searching for the black boxes after an Amazon cargo plane crashed in Texas, killing all 3 people on board. Our senior transportation correspondent, David Curley, is there at the site. David, why are these black boxes so hard to find?
Because the big question we do not have an answer to is why this plane fell out of the sky early Saturday afternoon here outside of Houston. It was only about 6,000 feet above the surface when it fell out of the sky. There is 5 seconds of video captured by a security camera at a jail nearby, and it is nose down and hits into the marshes, which you can kind of see. You can see the staging area where they're working. Beyond those reeds is the marsh area where this crash site is. And because they know that it was nose down from 6,000 feet, no mayday call, lots of questions as to why that happened, and the black boxes will answer the question. Here's the problem. It's very shallow water. I flew out there yesterday in our station, KTRK's helicopter, and got a chance to look at the debris field. So it's very compact, which reinforces the fact that this was a steep dive into this bay. It's called Trinity Bay here outside of Houston. And you can see the pieces of the aircraft on the ground because there isn't much water out there. That seems to be the good news. It's in shallow water if there's any water. Tide was out at the time. The bad news is this is a marsh. It's mud. And those black boxes, the encasings that hold, the encasements that hold the actual electronics and the cards are very heavy, so they can sink in the mud. If you put layers of mud, excuse me, above the pingers, the transmitters, so you can locate them, it's difficult for those transmitters to transmit through the mud, harder to hear them. So the real question for the NTSB is they will scan that area listening for the pingers transmitting. If they don't hear it, then they're going to put people out there in waders or scuba divers if there's water and go through hand by hand trying to find it. If they don't, then they will dredge the area to find the black boxes. That's how critical they are to answer this question. And why do we want to know about this? It is a Boeing 767. That is a wide body, big aircraft, been in use for a long time. Diane, I would bet a lot of money that you've flown one, I've flown one. This is an aircraft that we use quite a bit. There is no reason that that aircraft, considering what was going on at the time, not much weather, nothing else, no mayday call, why would a Boeing 767 crash here on Saturday? And that's the question we got to get to.
And David, without these black boxes, do they have any idea what the answer might be?
They are very good investigators at the NTSB, and I did ask the chairman that specifically. If you don't get these black boxes, can you figure out what happened here? And he said, you know, he's been on cases before where black boxes haven't been discovered, and they have been able to solve it. This one's really going to be difficult. You know, they'll be looking at everything. They're going to look at the weather, they'll look at maintenance, they'll look at the engines, they'll look at the flight crew. They're looking at everything. And I should mention there were 3 on board, and we have found out that the 3rd person on board was with another airline, Mesa Airline, and was just taking a ride to get here to Houston. We have not gotten the ID of the 2 Atlas Air crew members who were on board that aircraft so far. And we do know that 2 bodies have been recovered. We haven't been told who they are and whether the 3rd body, they should be still looking for it at this point.
And David, I know you flew above the crash site itself. Does anything about it stick out to you? Is that mud the biggest focus right now?
2 things kind of struck me. One was the compact debris field. It's only about a football wide and 2 football fields long, 1 football field wide, and you can see a tire from the landing gear upside down. You can see some of the logos from Amazon that are on pieces of the fuselage. But what is striking is how much this aircraft broke apart. It was going at a very high speed when it hit the marsh area behind me. In fact, the NTSB chairman told me he looked at the video, only 5 seconds of it, but he says you could see it in its nosedive, and then it hits the ground, the water, the marsh, whatever you want to call it, and debris starts flying up. It's very dramatic, he said, and what he thought about at the time was the loss of life in that instant when the aircraft hit the ground. But it is because of that compact, and the videos only confirm this. Why did this plane nosedive out of the sky from just 6,000 feet, which is not very high for a jetliner?
All right, David Curley for us. We appreciate it, David. Thank you. And now to weather, where more than 90 million people are bracing for strong winds after tornadoes ripped through the south, leaving a path of damage. ABC's Marcus Moore is in Columbus, Mississippi, one of the hardest hit areas. And Marcus, what does it look like there right now?
Hey, Diane, good morning. It's a messy scene here. We're inside what is left of a church here in Columbus, Mississippi, that, as you can see, the sanctuary took a direct hit, and it is exposed to the elements here. The sun is shining, and you see all of the destruction. This is where the pastor and the church choir would stand on a Sunday morning or on during services during the week. Instead, it is a pile of rubble. And then to my left, you see some of the pews. And that was the interesting thing that we noticed when we got here after the storm hit, was the fact that the pews appeared to be untouched. And then the pulpit was right here. It was also, we understand, according to church members, untouched, despite the winds that the National Weather Service says were upwards of 130 miles an hour. The experts with the Weather Service saying that this tornado that caused all of this damage here was an EF3. And Diane, we know that one person was killed when the building she was in collapsed on top of her. She was pulled from that rubble badly injured and rushed to an area hospital where sadly she passed away on the operating table, and several people were hurt. But this is a scene, as you see here, this destruction that has been repeated throughout the region here in Columbus. A number of homes and businesses also taking direct hits. So they have a lot, Diane, to clean up here in the coming days, weeks, and perhaps months.
I bet. And how's the area handling that cleanup now?
You're doing the best they can, really. I mean, it's strong people here, and there's certainly no strangers to severe weather. And what we have seen in our time here is obviously the work to get the infrastructure back up and running, the power lines and getting debris cleared. And we also see people helping people, neighbors who are here, family members who have arrived to help their relatives clean up what they can at their homes, because there are people who have literally lost their homes, that are the roofs are gone or walls have been knocked down, and so they're going to have to start from scratch. And having said that, Diane, there is still a real sense of optimism. Despite the destruction you see here, they are confident that they will be able to move forward from this, but it'll be a difficult road.
All right, understandably so. Marcus Moore there from Mississippi. We appreciate it, Marcus. Thank you. And now let's find out what's ahead for the weather. Ginger Z has our forecast for us. Ginger?
Thank you, Diane. Let's go ahead and get into this week's forecast, and there's a lot of wind. That's where we're going to begin. The wind plus the snow caused blizzard conditions, 131 car pileup. One person died here, 71 people that were sent to the hospital. It wasn't, again, it was those blizzards where it's mostly about the wind and visibility. Then you go, and it's all wind in Buffalo, New York, where there's no snow on the ground, but you've got gusts up to 74 miles per hour, taking out trees. It's been so saturated, too, throughout the Northeast. When you have these high wind warnings, that's going to be a problem. You can easily take down trees. I think that it will definitely impact, especially through this afternoon, some of the flights if you're flying out of LaGuardia or perhaps JFK. Look at this, though. We have to go to the west because there's a new storm, another atmospheric river that's going to be pouring into the San Francisco Bay Area and northern California. See, it's mostly Tuesday and the Tuesday night, but it'll all be wrapping up by Wednesday morning. What it leaves in its wake is up to a foot of rain and 100 inches on tap for parts of the Sierra again. It's been such a wet year. They are so above their average and certainly above the last couple of years. This is great for them to see, but again, it's going to be coming pretty fast for a lot of folks, so we're concerned about burn scars. And then finally, I'll leave it with this. Never hurts to see a good ice shove. That's from the wind blowing the ice off of the lake. You see Fort Erie there in Canada. These happen in a lot of places each year, but they're just still spectacular to see. That one's just aggressive. Usually it's a little slower than that. Diane?
Wow. Amazing to see just how powerful that wind is. All right, well, be careful out there, everybody. That does it for us here at the Debrief. For all things politics, don't forget to check out the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And, of course, you'll get the update at 8 p.m. at ABC News Live Prime as well. Don't forget, all day long, we are on your ABC News app and at abcnews.com. For ABC News Live, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.